Hello everybody, my name is Andrei Dima and I am a traveling photographer. And I've been using the Nikon D850 for 2 years now, maybe more. And wanted to review this camera and tell you my experience with it if you want to buy it in 2020. Let's start with the body and build quality. I'll tell you from the start, it is built like a tank. The buttons are almost perfectly mapped and it has a great and snappy touchscreen for a camera this old. There are cameras from 2020 that have worse touchscreens, like my Fuji X-T4. The weather resistance is very good. I used this camera in rain at minus 20 degrees and in very humid conditions, and I had no problem with it. But don't go putting it underwater and keep it away from salt water. This ruins any camera. Oh, and did I tell you, it has illuminated buttons, which at night are a blessing. More cameras should do this. And of course, for a professional camera, it has 2 card slots, one XQD and one SD. Oh yeah, and the screen is tiltable for shooting photos in different angles. I almost forgot, the battery life is just amazing. I shot like 1200 photos with this camera, and most of them were long exposures. But in video the battery doesn't last too much. But it is okay, around 1 hour. Let's talk about the weight of this camera. It is a heavy camera for 2020, but if you pair it with light lenses, like Nikon 20mm 1.8 for landscape or the 35mm for everyday use, it is not that bad. I like a heavy camera and a big grip. I find it fits my hands better than a mirrorless camera. Don't think I have something against mirrorless. I don't. I think they're the next step in the evolution of cameras. But I don't think the time of the DSLRs is over. I own a Fuji X-T4 and I love it, especially for video. Now let's talk about autofocus. Autofocus is great in good light conditions and almost good in low light. It misses sometimes, but most DSLRs do. The Nikon 3D tracking has always been great. I think this is the maximum a DSLR can do with autofocus. A great feature to have is the focus stacking. You can set the camera to take multiple pictures with different focus points and combine them in Photoshop to get sharp photos all around. This is great for landscape photographers and architecture photographers. Another amazing feature of this camera is the option to make time lapses or interval shooting. You can make 8K time lapses because of the 45 megapixel sensor. And it has the option to do 4K time lapse internally. You cannot do 8K internal. You need to do it in post. But that's okay. This is a great feature for a travel photographer and people who love time lapses. Now let's talk about video. This camera was never made for video. But if you have decent light conditions, the 4K 150 megabytes per second files look quite nice. The problem is you cannot edit them very much because you get a lot of noise and posterization. In low light, if you don't have a good source of light, the camera is very noisy. But if you wanna shoot interviews, let's say, and have good quality light, this camera should be enough. A big problem of this camera is that the video autofocus, in my opinion, is unusable because it hunts a lot. And you have the option for 1080p at 120 frames per second, which I use to make this intro for my Fujifilm X-T4 review. For a heavy camera, you can still use it with small gimbals, like the Zhiyun Weebill S, as you can see in this video here. Even with a big lens like the Tamron 24-70 f2.8. Now let's talk about dynamic range, which I find again impressive. Look at this photo. I shot this after a long day and forgot to change my settings, so I got this mess. But because the great dynamic range of the Nikon D850, I managed to recover it in post. The Nikon D850 has a 45 megapixel sensor, which you can say it's a poor man's medium format. And it has a native low ISO of 64, which allows you to shoot detailed photos without no noise. And this is great for shooting in studios, because in a studio you don't mind the weight of the camera, like traveling, let's say. In 2 years, this camera has never disappointed me regarding photography. Nikon always made great cameras, but I think this one, it's one of their best, maybe the best. Another great thing about a 45 megapixel sensor is that you can crop and still retain a lot of detail, like this photo over here. The low light performance is great until 6400, like these pictures over here. Don't expect it to be magic, but for a 45 megapixel sensor, it does a great job. And another great thing about the sensor is that it doesn't have bending, like the mirrorless cameras these days. In conclusion, this is a great camera for photography, not so much for video, but it can get the job done. It has amazing features and a great build quality, and the battery life is amazing. Nikon has a great selection of f-mount lenses for this type of camera. If you have this type of lenses and you want to upgrade from an older model, you should get this camera. But if you just have a few lenses, I think you should go with a mirrorless camera. Or get this camera second hand. I saw it has a great price. If you like my photos and want to support my channel, check out the Lightroom presets I made for myself to easily edit my photos while I'm traveling. Check them out in the link below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.